Welcome to the Ben and Tony podcast. Today we have Chris Allen as an incredible guest. By the age of 21, Chris had already gone through 4 near-death experiences. This led to very severe trauma, and Chris eventually ended up in a world of drug addiction, homelessness, and almost went through a life-threatening overdose in 2006. When he had reached the most extreme limits of the human spirit, Chris was eventually able to turn to music, fitness, and ayahuasca to help his healing process. And as Chris says, with an incredible sense of humor, sometimes hitting rock bottom can be the best thing for you. Chris is now the co-founder of the Earth Medicine Experience, a retreat in Peru that helps people on their own journeys of healing and self-discovery through deep earth medicine and through Chris's own experiences in his own life story. Believe me when I tell you that this is one of the wildest stories I have ever heard in my entire life. This conversation is raw, it's intense, and while you might not agree with some of the decisions Chris has made, you need to hear his story. Because in a world where many people are suffering and going through similar trauma, Chris's story is a light of hope. It's a light that's battered, bruised, but bright. Have a listen and tell us what you think.
Yep. This one is intense, and we're very excited to announce our sponsorship with the Making Lemonade Fund, Gen Z's fastest growing nonprofit, led by our very own guest Jessie Kay. They work on a variety of worthy causes, including COVID-19 relief, pediatric cancer, and more. Join the movement at makinglemonadefund.com, and there is no G in that one. How very Gen Z. Now, on to Chris Allen.
Today we have a very special guest, and his name is Chris Allen. We're so excited to have him. Chris is originally from Canada, but is currently leading the Earth Medicine Experience in Peru, which is a series of retreats based around psychedelics such as ayahuasca, helping people really find themselves and reflect upon moments of struggle. Previously, Chris has been a health coach in places all around the world, particularly Southeast Asia. And prior to that, Chris was drug addicted and homeless in East Vancouver, Canada, and then got out of it and has come through quite an amazing, impressive journey. And we're so excited to have him here today to talk about his journey and all the moments of transition that Chris has been through.
Oh, yeah.
So Chris, thank you so much for being here. So excited to have you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Ben. It's nice to meet you guys and have a conversation.
So you're from Nova Scotia and then moved to Vancouver, and maybe tell us about that first major story that was probably the biggest transition period in your life.
Okay, the first transition that happened would have been then from moving from Nova Scotia out to Vancouver, and there's a lot of backstory. So I want to, before I get into the heavy stuff, we're going to dive in. There's a lot of lead up and there's a lot of story. So I'll try to give a Cole's Notes version so we can move the story along. For sure. But there was a lot of things. So like I said, I'm from Nova Scotia, a small town. Growing up, but I had a very unique childhood, as in when I endured a lot of trauma at a very early age, and it shaped me and then in turn shaped my journey. We were talking about the hero's journey. Yeah. There's been many calls to adventure that I've had, and I've tried to answer as many as possible, and there's been a shitload of dragons. I can say that. So basically what happened when, and I'll give sort of a timeline of trauma that I experienced when I was growing up in a small town, which is interesting now given the times of COVID. But when I was 8 years old, I contracted a strange virus. And being from a small town, I went to the hospital to get checked out, and they didn't know what I had. But essentially what happened is a gland on the side of my neck started to develop, and it blew up the size of a softball, and I could barely breathe. And I was put into a medical quarantine when I was 8 years old. So 8 years old, I ended up being basically just put in this basement of a hospital where nobody could come and see me, like my mother and father. Anybody would come in would have to have full protective gear. So, just a full-on quarantine, medical quarantine experience. I ended up spending, I think it was about 2 months in 2 different hospitals. I was moved to what was referred to the IWK, which is a children's hospital in the closest city, where they were trying to monitor what I had. basically I was in quarantine for about 2 months when I was 8 years old, which was very scary for an 8-year-old. You know,
Oh
you're
yeah, I bet.
not able to, you know, it's like everybody's like, that was training for the COVID, but COVID's been pretty light compared to that, you know. So I was ready for that. It's just been a little longer, but I went through that experience, and basically what happened was my body just recovered on its own, and the doctors never really knew what it was, and they didn't cure it. It just went away. So that was when I was 8. A year later, I had a bucket of burning gasoline kicked on my legs, and it basically set my legs on fire. It was the summertime. I was wearing shorts, and I started to run because I was panicking. Obviously, I'm on fire. You know, I'm covered in gas.
Yeah.
Luckily, there was a little bit of a cliff in the backyard of where I was at. I fell off that and rolled to the bottom, and the fire was out. I went and got in the shower and basically just wiped all the gas. But when I was wiping the gas, I wiped all the skin off my legs. I had 3rd-degree burns to probably about 60% of my legs. So again, being from a small town, I was rushed to the hospital. The doctor on call that night didn't have any previous experience with burns. He put some cream on my legs and sent me home. I was in full-on shock. I mean, literally the risk of infection through the roof. You know, burn victims, when you've got 3rd-degree burns, you're in serious condition. You need medical
You're 9 years
assistance.
old as well.
Yeah, and I'm 9 years old. Cream ain't gonna cut it. It's like gonna need a little more than cream, boys. It's like anyway. Long story short, my father and my brother realized there was something really wrong with me because I was vomiting, I was passing out, I couldn't stay awake. So they got me back to the hospital, and then the family doctor was like, holy fuck, I mean, he's gonna die. So I was rushed off to the children's hospital again and spent 3 months where I had to undergo skin grafting operations, the burn bath every day. So a lot of pain, a lot of trauma there. And learning how to walk again, because literally being bedridden for 3 months flat on your back, you know, and as a 9-year-old, you kind of lose your mind in that process. That's, you know, the worst part about burns is when they heal. And when burns start to heal, they start to itch really bad. So as a 9-year-old kid, I was scratching my legs where I had skin grafts, and I would rip the skin grafts. So eventually they had to tie me to the bed. So I'm a 9-year-old and I'm in agony with itching and trying to claw away. So basically those 2 traumas, at the time I didn't realize it, but now I do realize it, that those 2 traumas combined caused me severe PTSD. I mean, now we have a name for it, but you know, I'm a 10-year-old kid that has no idea. Like it's all about learn how to walk again, get your physical body going again, get moving. But what happened is, you know, at a very early age, I started to use drugs. I started to use alcohol. I started to use, you know, smoking pot, taking LSD, taking mushrooms. It was like I was taking a lot of things to try to cope with what I was going through, and I didn't realize it at the time. So, you know, got in a lot of trouble as a kid, ended up leaving home at 15, was in drugs and all kinds of bad shit. And it was literally, like I said, looking back on it at the time, it was like, I didn't know how to cope with the things that had happened to me. It was like compound PTSD on top of one another. So at some point, you know, I had a transition there where I basically got caught selling drugs at the high school I was at. And I had basically a settlement from the time that I got burned in the fire, where I had some money in the bank that was entrusted with my parents. And they said, well, you know, it was either go to juvenile detention or get sent away to a private school. So I can go to a private military school and get, you know, training and get reformed. So we went with that choice. And it was a good transition to my life. I was doing jiu-jitsu at the time. I was playing rugby. So I transitioned around. I ended up going to university. So I ended up going to University of Dalhousie. I was always fascinated with psychology and nutrition and athletes and what, you know, drives some people to push harder than others, and how some people can overcome certain things or cope with more. You know, when you look at soldiers or athletes that can take so much punishment or mental abuse and still push forward. So always fascinated with that. So reformed around and ended up back in university. But my second year of university, I was involved in a head-on car crash. So this was my third major trauma. And I was traveling it was my first day of classes, my second year. And I had been working shift work at Michelin tire plant. My father worked there, so I was working to pay for my tuition. Shift work is very demanding, so working sometimes from midnight till noontime the next day, and I worked the whole summer. basically driving into my first day of class as I fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the middle line. There was a woman coming the other way, and we were on the highway. It's a famous highway in Nova Scotia. It's known as the Highway of Death because it's not twinned, it's not separated. So literally cars are traveling at 120 kilometers an hour, and there's nothing, there's an imaginary line.
You planned that one. Wow.
It's like, and that's, unfortunately, the imaginary line doesn't stop real problems from happening. So I was in a head-on car crash. There was a woman driving the car coming the other way. We hit both going about 120 kilometers an hour. I was trapped in the car, and the trauma that happened to me in that day, I was basically at one point had a near-death experience. So this will tie into a lot of the stuff I'll talk later about when we get into talking about toad medicine and 5-MeO-DMT. But essentially what happened to me on that day was the trauma that my body sustained is I had an open book fracture of my pelvis. So my pelvis exploded open. Both femurs broke. The left one was a butterfly fracture, so it basically just shattered. The right leg femur bone was a clean snap. The right ankle was a compound dislocation, so it basically blew out the side of the ankle, was just flopping out. The left foot was completely crushed, so all the metatarsal bones, lacerated the liver, collapsed my lung, tore 2 layers of my aorta, and had a shitload of just soft tissue damage. Like everything was cut open. I had a massive cut on my neck that was literally a centimeter away from the jugular. I was bleeding profusely from the neck. But that day, like I said, I had an out-of-body experience. And this is something I'll share because, like I said, it'll tie in later with the toad experience. But that day, I left my body and I was floating above the crash scene. And I was looking down. And I remember reaching for the treetops and thinking that I had a hand, and there was no arm there and there was no body. I was just there floating amongst the trees, and I could feel the breeze flowing back and forth. And I just felt complete euphoria, it was just completely euphoric and relaxed. And I could feel love, and there was this white light everywhere, and it was beautiful. And I remember looking down at the crash scene, and then the voice of my dead grandfather came to me, and he said, "Christopher, it's not your time. You need to go back." And I remember, it's like, I tell this story and it's like, I always have to be careful with telling this story because I don't want it to come off as sounding cheesy or something, but this is the experience that I had. And it's like, it's the only way. And I remember it so clearly that it's like, again, it's like what happens upon, when we're born and when we die is we get a natural release of DMT. So I'm not saying that it was my dead grandfather coming from the spirit world, but that's kind of what it was. You know what I mean? Like this is what happened. So he told me I needed to go back. And as I look down and see the crash scene, I'm like, I don't know if I want to go back there. It's like I think we'll come with you. We'll call it a day. And this is where we'll check out. And he's like, no, you need to go back. So basically I went back into my body, and, from the trauma that I had, it was horrific. I mean, the surgeries I ended up having, I forget how many hours in total, but there were at least 6 major surgeries. The first one was 13 hours long, and a big shout out to the doctor who worked on me. Dr. Ross Layton is his name. Always wore cowboy boots, would have a cowboy hat. And I was like, this is my kind of doctor. He's like,
are you still in touch?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't stayed in touch with him now for a few years because it's been a very long time. This was when I was 19 years old. So, but we used to always send messages back and forth, and I'm sure he's retired and living the good life now. But I basically got rolled in after he had already put in a full shift, and he was the orthopedic surgeon. Like, he was the lead orthopedic surgeon, and nobody else. Like, they were literally going to amputate my legs. My father bust into the operating room screaming at them, "You can't take his legs. He's an athlete. He's an athlete. You can't take his legs. You have to save them." And they're like, "Who are we going to call? We need to call this doctor." So literally, after already working a full shift, he turns around. I don't know how many cups of coffee he had or if he had any stimulants to get him going, but then operated on me for over 13 and a half hours, where they completely reconstructed my lower body. So my pelvis has plates and screws. My femurs are 2 metal rods. I've got locking screws in my knees, a screw in the ankle, pins in the foot. Like I said, the lung was collapsed. They had to operate on the liver. They had to get everything else, stitched back up. So, it's like, A lot of the times I do shit on the medical industry because of big pharma and some doctors that are in the pockets, and there's a scam going on, I believe right now that, I do shit on a lot of the medical industry, but there are surgeons and there are doctors and there are methods and people that do amazing work. And I have to always, be thankful for that, because literally he saved my legs. They were going to amputate. They were that fucked. I mean, they were just mangled. They were just completely, when the firefighters found me at the scene, they're like, we don't know, like, what's the car and what's human here. It's just all just kind of mashed together, like hamburger meat squeezed into the into the car. So basically, after all that happened, I rehabbed, and it took me about a year. And I was like, you know what, speaking of transition, I'm like, I'm not going to go to Dalhousie. I'm going to switch up. I'm going to focus. I'm going to go more into the nutrition side of things. I'm going to switch universities to Acadia University. So the following year, I missed that whole other year at Dalhousie, and I went to Acadia University. Within 2 weeks, I was 2 weeks into classes, and I was cruising on my bicycle to my day of classes with a full backpack of my books and laptop. And at the time, laptops were fucking huge, so a lot of weight on my backpack. A car decides to cut out in front of me, and I hit it with my.
This is
Oh, there's more, man. That's like, we're just getting started, baby. It's like, hold up. It's like, so I fly up over the car and I grind on my forearms, and I'm just, at the time, I remember just being filled with rage, and then just like complete, just couldn't believe it, like in denial, like this can't be fucking happening. Like, so I get up and I feel, like I said, I just feel this rage and this anger at the guy that didn't even signal, that just pulled out in front of me. And I look down, and literally the side view mirror is sticking in my leg. So I pull that out, and blood starts to squirt, and I cover that up, and I kind of sit down for a second. The guy comes to talk to me. I'm like, just give me your name, give me your number, and just get away from me. I'm going home. So I ended up going back to my house that I was staying in for university. And my girlfriend at the time, I woke her up, she was staying there, and I asked her to take me to the hospital. Went to the hospital. I had to get all the road rash scrub, because there was gravel on the forearms. I had to get my legs stitched up because there was a big chunk out of that. But I was having chest pains, and I don't know if it was anxiety, but I was like, I'm having really bad chest pains. So they chest x-rayed me. And then I went on my way, and I ended up that weekend biking home to my other home, my parents' home, and where my girlfriend was at. It was over 100 kilometers on my bicycle. And I get home, and as soon as I get home, the phone rings, and it's the hospital. And they said, is this Christopher Allen? I'm like, yes, it is. And they're like, are you sitting down? No, I'm not. It's like, well, we have some news. Basically, the chest x-ray revealed that I had developed what's referred to as a pseudoaneurysm of the aorta, because I had torn 2 layers the year before in the car accident. How most people die in car accidents is their internal organs snap back and forth, and it rips, and your aorta rips, and you bleed to death. And that's what kills you. With me, it was like, the doctor said I was in pretty good shape, and I was strong. My heart was strong. 2 layers of the aorta tore. So in one section, it's almost like if you imagine a garden hose with 3 layers. If you tore 2 of them, it would slowly start to bubble out, and you'd see a bubble develop with the pressure. And that's what was happening in my heart. So again, long story short, rushed in for emergency open heart surgery. They ended up cutting in through my back. They went in, they had to collapse my other lung that wasn't collapsed in the accident, and cut a chunk out of the aorta, pull it together, and stitch it. So that's where the first big transition happened for me. I'm a small town boy, that's trying to go and do university and live, the life the way that I'm supposed to live it. Like, go to school, get an education, get a job, get married, the typical, I'm in this kind of thought mode, like I'm going to go and do everything. After the heart surgery, I'm like, fuck this. I'm not going back to university. I've always really enjoyed music. I've been playing guitar and writing songs since I've been 15 years old. And I said, I'm going to pursue my music dream. So that's what took me to Vancouver. My brother was out there working in the film industry. My brother is about 8 years older than I am. He had already established a good base out there. So I'm like, he's like, why don't you come out and just, because everybody's like, what's going on with Chris? Like, how evil was he? Like, what kind of dictator was he in a past life? Because this shit is fucked up. And it's just kind of like, so that's what initially took me out to Vancouver. And I ended up enrolling in a music production course where I was learning about recording and, like learning how the studio works with all the different microphones. And it was my dream. Because
just before we get to Vancouver, like, how are you processing your own physical health and your injuries, and like, how are you thinking about all this that had happened at the time?
Well, a lot of it that I can attribute to my healing was before the car accident happened. I had literally, like, I always joke that my first year of university, I majored in jiu-jitsu because I barely spent any time at the university. I discovered I had been training with a group of guys, and I loved jiu-jitsu. I had already gone. My brother had taken me when I was 16 years old to train with Hoist Gracie and Horion Gracie up in Toronto. And I just had just such a love for it. So I was involved in martial arts. And at the time, I mean, I'm talking like this is back in UFC 1 days.
You were actually training with the Gracies. I know I love jiu-jitsu and I love MMA, and like, that's a pretty big deal.
That's a huge fucking deal, man. He's a legend. When I was 16 years old, I got to roll with Hoist Gracie for about 10 minutes. And I was a kid, so he let me do some things and let me roll around. And then after about 10 minutes, he fucking locked it up and tapped me out. And it was the best experience of my life. It was like
10 minutes
one of them for sure.
Over in seconds, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on now. It's like, I was like, and back then nobody even knew jiu-jitsu. Like, I was like, I remember the first time I saw the guard, and I was like, what's this? And it's like, like once you start realizing those techniques, it's mind blowing. But back in those days, like I said, this is UFC 1, UFC 2 days where motherfuckers are still wearing like one boxing glove, and everybody's still trying to figure it out, because that was when the revolution happened. When Hoist Gracie stepped into the octagon, it's like, I respect all martial arts, because if anything can get somebody off the couch and get them training, if Tai Chi is your thing or Kung Fu is your thing, but it's like, I don't like the cult-like aspects of martial arts. And I experienced that growing up with like certain, like, senseis, bow to your sensei and do this. And there's all that, you see the fake martial arts on Instagram. It's like the guy using his chi. I mean, I've seen that go horribly wrong when a guy tries to center his chi against the Russian assassin. It's like, oh, it's like, that might be a bad idea, bro. You might want to center your chi somewhere else.
Well, did your injuries get in the way of any of the jiu-jitsu you're doing, or like, because after the car crash, were you?
Yeah, no, I began doing jiu-jitsu when I was 15 years old. After I saw UFC 1. I remember seeing Hoist Gracie choke out Ken Shamrock, and I was like, how is that even fucking possible? Like, I remember, my brother brought home a VHS cassette tape at Christmas time. And he's like, you got to check this out. And he put it in, and I remember it all coming up and the sound, and it was just like it was yesterday. And I remember looking at him like, this is real? Like, this is real? He's like, this is real. I'm like, but not like Kung Fu or like, like Bruce Lee, like, this is real? And he's like, this is real. And I remember just watching it so intently. And the first fight with Gerard Gordeau against the sumo, I think Telly Tuli, or I forget his name, Teletuli, I think, and just kicked his teeth out into the front row. And I remember thinking, holy shit, like, this is real. and then seeing Hoist Gracie come out against Ken Shamrock and watching, like, and I remember like just being so sure. I'm like, that Jack dude is going to smash this guy in the gi, because I thought he was just going to come out like White Tiger, with his claw action or settling his chi. And next thing you know, he's on his back and he's choking him. And it blew my mind. I was like, how did that little scrawny guy? And it's actually a well-known fact in the Gracie family that Hoist was chosen. They didn't take Hickson, because if you're familiar with jiu-jitsu, Hickson Gracie is the godfather of jiu-jitsu. And when you look at him, he looks the part. He's fucking jacked. He's athletic. You look at Hoist's posture is like, he's just tall and lanky. There's not really a lot of muscle tone. So they knew that it would be more powerful to show like, hey, look, it's the technique. I mean, obviously the sport's evolved now that when you got guys that are fucking jacked and know the technique, the athlete is gonna win for sure. And MMA is completely different. But yeah, I mean, So for me, I started training when I was 15, and it was just literally like video cassettes and like remembering getting like the Russian Bear, Oleg Taktarov, and Sambo leg locks, and Dan Severin's instructionals, and just going through VHS cassette tapes and trying to learn. And then having my brother take me when I was 16 to Toronto to do a seminar with Hoyce and Horion, and did that. And then basically going back to Halifax, Nova Scotia, there was a core group of guys that were training all the time at a university, and we would all get together. There'd be different styles. But after my car accident, I was fucked. I mean, I had a very close friend who he helped me get back on the mats, but literally I would straighten my leg and a screw would lock into my quad muscle, and I couldn't bend my leg. I would have things that were going on. So essentially it was a very tough period for me, because I felt like this was something so important to me, that this was my life, and it was a huge part. And I even remember at one point my father telling me, you should also be focused on other things, because what happens if you can't do this for, and those words haunted me, because it was like, yeah, okay, that was my dream to go all the way with it, but it didn't play out that way. After the car accident, then the heart surgery, it was just like, it was so much trauma on my body. Like literally, I remember trying to, in a light sparring session, even just checking a Muay Thai kick and getting kicked in the screws. It's like, I can't do this. You know what I mean? It was just at that point, it's like, this is, and it's a hard thing for a man to go from feeling like he's powerful to completely vulnerable. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I was going to say, the mental toll of that is much more significant probably than the physical toll.
And that's what I'll get into, because the reality is when I transitioned out to Vancouver, I probably got about 2 months into my recorded music production course when the depression hit. And the depression hit fucking hard. Like I'm talking literally for a year and a half. I would see my brother because he was there, but really the only people I would see would be at the liquor store, or would be the cocaine dealer that would come and drop off 8-balls for me. Do you know what I mean? And it was just, I didn't know how to deal with it, because I'd had, this virus when I was 8, the burns when I was 9, the car accident when I'm 19, the heart surgery when I'm 21. And it's just like, after all that, I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like now I can't train. Like I actually got back in great physical condition, and was in great shape, but it's just the combat full contact sports and just getting kicked and smashed. It's like when you're broken for so long and you've spent so much time in a wheelchair, the last thing you want to do is have another injury. Do you know what I mean? And it is a mind fuck, because then I'm in this fear state where something's going to break. And just hearing the doctor's words of, oh, well, just so you know now, if your leg won't break, the bone won't break, it's reinforced with steel, so it'll just shatter. And I'm like, oh, perfect. It's like that's not really what you want to hear as an athlete. I mean, so unfortunately, that's something I kept training and I kept up my fitness, but then I tried to focus on music, because music was for me it's a huge, like, I can't even explain to you guys the amount of music I take in the run of a day, and the cross genres. Like it drives me fucking insane when I ask people, oh, what do you listen to? And it's like, oh, anything but. And I'm like, I hate that, because it's, there's so many amazing artists out there nowadays. And it's like, yes, music is, some of it's not as good as it used to be. Like if you like classic rock, but there's so many artists doing so many great things right now. And I
can't wait to find your Spotify 2020 Unwrapped, man.
There's some strange mixes, man. I mean, literally, I love everything from heavy metal, country, trip hop, rap, hip hop, like everything, classical. For me, music is therapy. It's one of the main things that I would attribute my healing to. I would attribute my healing, like some days when I was so beat up, smashed in my wheelchair, I would throw on some Rob Zombie or some Metallica, and I would get out and I would hammer my workout.
So when you arrived over in Vancouver, you joined up and signed up for a music course, and you're still unable to do any kind of jiu-jitsu. So you get into a foul depression in after 2 months there. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what did that look like for you?
Well, what it looked like is I stopped going to the course. I literally was spending all day, every day in my apartment, smoking fucking massive amounts of pot, BC Bud, trying not to drink for as late into the day as possible. Some days the whiskey would be open at 11, before noon, drunk before noon. It's just like not a good scene. It was dark, man. It was really fucking dark. It was like I had felt that I was going to be this great athlete, and I had come through so much, and that I felt like, and then the car accident took all that away from me, and then I felt like I'm going to chase this dream of writing music and affecting people that way, because for me it was, but that period was literally, I lost interest in everything. And any of your listeners that have ever suffered with depression, it's like literally, man, like it sucks the fun out of everything. It pushes everybody away, and really it's like you're just left alone. Like nobody wants to be around you. You don't want to be around yourself. And it's like during those times, like there's actually a fact, and it's something that I read a long time ago, and I don't remember the article or the author, but they talked about people that underwent open heart surgery, that anybody that has actually physically had their heart touched, that has stopped, had it touched or operated on, there's something like some ridiculous amount, like 50 to 70% of those people suffer a massive depression. And half of those people try to commit suicide. Do you know what I mean? So there's like some kind of direct relation between the heart and how it's touched or traumatized, and then how it affects us mentally. Do you know what I mean? So for me, like you ask about that time in Vancouver, the initial, because there were a lot of dark times for me in Vancouver. Vancouver is a beautiful city and I have a lot of great friends there, but for me, there's a lot of old ghosts. I haven't been back since I left there. And it's like, I do want to go back and visit, and it's something that I do want to relive. But that period, I think, was just the accumulation of trauma after trauma, and my main focus only being on, I need to walk again. I need to get strong again. I need to get my athletics back. I need to do this. And none of it was like, what's going on in your head? Like later I would learn about, survivor's guilt. When you're involved in an accident that involves a death and it's your fault, and you have to live with that somebody's now dead because of you. And there's a shame that comes with that. And that's, for me, one of the most toxic human emotions is shame. Shame is what keeps us locked in these patterns of abuse, self-abuse, especially, like, and that's the life of an addict. I mean, when you're traumatized and you deal with so much trauma, there's a famous doctor. I'm bouncing over the place here because there's so much to this. It's a very complex story and a lot of things that happen, but there's a famous doctor in Vancouver. His name is Dr. Gabor Mate. He wrote a book called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost. So In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost is literally the Lower East Side of Vancouver, Canada, where he had his practice. And it's where I ended up running a mixed martial arts gym and being the head strength and conditioning coach there. Also, as a side job, working security on the streets to help enforce the area, because there were so many junkies and addicts. Like, we nicknamed it East Vanistan because it was like a fucking war zone. I mean, the place is dark. So for just to set the tone, people that want to get a better idea of what that area is like, Dr. Gabor Mate, and Dr. Gabor Mate also has an amazing TED Talk on addiction, which I think everybody should listen to. It's The Power of Addiction and the Addiction to Power. And we can get into some of those concepts later. But Dr. Gabor Mate is the first doctor working with addiction and trauma that he's like, all these doctors are asking why the addiction, and the Dr. Gabor Mate refers to it as like, not why the addiction. He's like, the addiction is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and that's killing pain. So the question is why the pain? Why the trauma? That's what we need to address with addicts, and not shame them and not have the people that are struggling with this, because there's a lot that people don't know about each other. There's a lot of traumas that people go and they stuff. So for me, it's like for most of my life, looking healthy, smiling, being able to interact with people, they think you're fine, but they don't know what's under the surface. And that's the big thing for me now, is especially in these times of COVID, is putting the word out about addiction and depression and mental illness and all these things. And it's why I'm working with psychedelics, because I've been down the big pharma route. I mean, I've been down that. So I went through, after the heart surgery, I went through a massive depression. It lasted probably about a year and a half, and then slowly started to lift. I mean, you don't come out of it quickly. When you're that deep, it takes a while. So I ended up getting myself out of that situation. And at the time, like I said, my brother was working in the film industry. So he managed to get me some work doing stunts and acting. And it was an opportunity for me. Now I'm like, I've got something. I did a few small jobs, with stunts and acting, trained some actors, got to meet a bunch of directors, and got sort of into that circle and into that. So I started to pick myself back up. But with that lifestyle also comes a lot of late nights, rap parties, cocaine, booze. There's a lot of that kind of element around as well. So I didn't last very long in that situation. Vancouver, I bounced around a lot, but because of the contacts I made, I basically just started building a personal training business. So I started coaching people, and at the time it was really good because it kept me in a better state of mind. I'm now helping people, and I'm getting out of my own head and actually working with other people that are struggling through things. And any personal trainers listening to this, they know that when you're training people, you're not just, I've never been the trainer. Like, any trainer can show you how to do a squat and a push up or a bench press and all that stuff. I mean, some of them can anyway, most of them can, but there's a lot to, like, we know what it takes to get in shape. You eat healthy, you train every day. How many people actually do that? It's like, there's a lot that don't. So I've always been fascinated by working with people in more of a mental capacity, because it's, like I said, for me and my fitness for so many years, it was all just based on getting my physical body going. And then I looked strong and I looked healthy, but I was actually fucking depressed and suicidal. So again, it's like, I nicknamed it superficial fitness. And it's like, do you want to look great and hate yourself? It's like the sign up. It's like, literally, it's like, because I've worked with a lot of fitness competitors, and it's like, when they're like 4% body fat and they look fucking great, they're miserable, they hate their life, they're not allowed to have any treats, and it's just like, some of them are happy, but most of them not, so it's superficial fitness is is a very slippery slope. But basically I ended up getting a job, like I said, managing a mixed martial arts gym. It was a private one. It was down on the Lower East Side. It was connected to a building that also had like a chop shop, so there were a lot of motorcycles around. There were a lot of a recording studio with a lot of the local metalheads. So it was a pretty intense scene. It's known as the 300 block in Vancouver, Canada. But again, it's like, I was around junkies, meth heads, prostitutes, gangsters. Like, I was in an environment that just, you walk into it and there was so much despair and hopelessness that the longer you stayed there, the more it rubbed off on you. Mm-hmm. So, I can't go into all the details of that time, because there were some things that happened, and some really dark periods and illegal activities and those type of things. But again, long story short, is that period of my life, I went from being, working in Vancouver and doing, decently well, to basically declining to the point where all my trauma and all my past demons that I hadn't dealt with started to flare up. I started to heavily abuse OxyContin, Percocet, cocaine, booze, pretty much anything. Like, I didn't give a fuck at that point. I was completely lost. I mean, there were a lot of lost souls. And I mean, it was interesting because I was working the security job where literally we were having to defend different stores from junkies, literally walking in off the street with a hammer, smashing the window and just grabbing and going. Like, that's the type of area this was. Like, chasing somebody at night who stole a fucking sweater from a store into an abandoned warehouse, and stepping on the floor and feeling the floor move and realizing there are all these junkies in a hovel in this fucking warehouse, literally. And this is in Canada. This is people like, oh, you're from Canada. It's like, yeah, but there are parts, like, such extreme poverty and addiction. And like I said, this is where, like, the people, to set the tone, if anybody's interested, read In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost, because Dr. Gabor Mate breaks down these personal stories of, like, this is the area where, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, most Canadians are, but there was a man called Robert Picton. Robert Picton was known as the pig farmer. He had a pig farm, and what he would do is he would travel to the Lower East Side and pick up prostitutes, mostly native prostitutes that had no family looking for them and nobody cared about them, would take them back and kill them and feed them to the pigs. It's like a fucking Rob Zombie or a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Like, it's literally like horrific. And like, this whole area, the darkness, like I said, that it's hard to believe that there's a place.
There's a real lack of identity of the people there as well.
Oh, it's like, and that's the thing is like for a while when I'm doing the security job, and literally like I worked with a security team of 6 other guys. You know, we all trained mixed martial arts, and we all had one another's backs. We had like security cameras and and we would even talk to the cops, and the cops like, hey, this guy just ripped off an old lady. You know, if you get a chance, smash him. And these are the cops saying, it's like, okay, like, you know, it's like it was just complete, like every day, like The Walking Dead or Day of the Dead, just like these lost souls. And like I said, we would sometimes detain them, and we would catch people in one of the stores, and we would put them in a holding cell and call the police and come pick them up. And they're like, we're not coming to pick them up. There's just like, they're going to get a place to stay and a free meal now. It's like, they're just put them back out on the street. So literally, like some of the stories are so heartbreaking. And for me, I would see it's just people that are traumatized. Do you know what I mean? It's like the war on drugs is a war against traumatized people. That's really what it is. It's like most people, it's like they're not having fun. It's not to party. It's because they don't know how to deal with all the shit that life has thrown at them. And the only thing that helps is heroin or booze or crack. And again, it's like, it just takes people down and out, and it's fucking horrible to watch.
At the time, at the time, like what was going through your head in terms of like what you saw your future being? I mean, it seemed like you were in a situation where that you were coping with your own trauma in that way. And did you think about like, you have to get out of that environment? Did you think about like, what's going to happen in 5 years or?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, at that point there was no 5-year program. It was 5 days. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like at that point it was like, what are the next 5 days hold for me? I mean, I declined quickly, and being in that situation and not having, you know, I remember at the time my brother had left, so I didn't have any family there. It was my parents back on the East Coast. Nobody really knew what was going on with me. So I spiraled out of control, you know, and it's just, what was going on was like, what the fuck am I doing? You know, because you know, there were many different times during that period in Vancouver where, you know, I did try to take my own life. I mean, I literally at one point during one of the depressions, because there were several of them, like I remember laying a tarp down in the bathtub and loading the shotgun and sitting there and thinking, you know, like, this is it. And the only thing stopping me from doing it, which is so strange at the end, was the shame of the person that's going to find me. Feeling the shame. That was the one time where shame actually served me, because I'm like, I'm going to pull a fucking brain volcano in this bathtub, and the poor bastard that finds me is going to be traumatized because they're going to see me with half of my head gone. And it's like, so again, it's like those are the thoughts I was having when I was in that moment. And I'm like, and then the secondary thoughts that came in is like, you've survived so much shit. How can you end yourself? You fought to be alive. And that was the mind fuck for me, is like, I've been through so much. I had to learn how to walk again twice, once after the burns, once after the car accident. I had to learn how to breathe again after the heart surgery, like, you know, being hooked up to ventilators and then off them and all the different surgeries. And I'm like, why now? And it's like, it's because I didn't know how to deal with the emotional and the mental trauma. The emotional and the mental trauma for me, like, again, when it's so complex, because when somebody has a broken leg and they're wheeled in, oh, the doctor, boom, he's got a broken leg, we're gonna do this and that. It's like, if you've got a broken heart or a broken spirit, how the fuck do you fix that? There's no doctor. They're not trained in bedside manner. They've got enough. There should be a bridge in the medical system. And, you know, the medical system is already overloaded, so it's not going to happen. I'm living in a dream world, but that bridge of like, the people that undergo physical trauma, to then have somebody that can help them with the mental and the emotional to help get them back into society. It's almost like being institutionalized. It's like coming out of prison. You need to learn how to interact again. Coming out of a medical situation where you're facing life and death every day and they're cutting chunks out of you. And then it's like, okay, go back to, it's like the soldier that comes home from war. It's like, okay, go to the grocery store now. And it's just kind of like, when you're dealing with so much trauma, it's all those little trivial things that are so difficult. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know how to face life and death, but you like, what cereal are you going to pick, or where are you going to go? Like, there's so many things. Trauma is brutal. So that area, like basically what you said, I realized that I got to the point where I had, but when all that shit happened, and I went through where I got mega addiction to Oxycontin, Percocets. I'm literally crushing up Oxycontin and snorting it. And I've been doing it for so long that I would get what's referred to as the nods, where I'm passing out, that I would now start to mix the downers with the uppers, using cocaine to keep me up. And then, so my heart doesn't know what the fuck's going on. I ended up checking into a rehab facility for 3 months. And I spent 3 months working a 12-step program. There's all kinds of stories around that. I mean, I have some good things about the 12-step program and some bad things, like 12 steps are great for some people, but a lot of the people I was around, they were just trading one addiction for another. Now it's like 90 meetings in 90 days. Now you need to go to a meeting every single day. And it's like, I'm looking at the people at the meeting and all they're doing is slopping around in their fucking grief and telling their horrible stories and smoking packs of cigarettes and eating candy. And I'm like, you guys aren't healthy. Like, this is not for me. Like, I remember seeing, they're like, Chris, you're focusing on the wrong things. And I'm like, I'm focusing on the fact that I just watched a guy that's 60 pounds overweight talk about how he's had sobriety for 30 years and he's overweight and depressed and smokes a pack of cigarettes and eats 10 chocolate bars in front of me. If that's recovery, I don't fucking want it. So it's like, you guys can keep it, So it's like, there was actually a writer, his name's Tommy Rose, and he wrote something called Recovery 2.0. Where he incorporates now in yoga, breath work, healthy eating, which is finally somebody's done it, because, you go from being an addict and it's like, literally, I watch people that work the 12-step program. It's like, I've been sober for 372 days and 12 hours. And I'm just like, they're still so focused on what they don't do that they're not. And again, I'm not sure, it didn't work for me because I had a really hard time wrapping my head around the whole God thing. And it's like, since times come to pass, I've become a little bit lighter with that. Like we have these terms, like that word God can mean so many different things to so many different people. And for me, it represented, establishment and a lot of the things that are wrong with churches and religion. So I fought that. I was fighting all the wrong things when I should have been focused on my own recovery, but I've always been a rebel and that's just my style. So, but,
what did it take for you to check yourself into rehab?
Well, I had to contact my parents and my brother. My brother actually drove me there. My brother has worked. He created something called Bodog Fight, which was a mixed martial arts event, and it was in Vancouver. And I remember the night I was just drinking so much whiskey. I was snorting so much cocaine. I had a meltdown. I ended up taking a bunch of pills and had paramedics come to my house and have to pump my stomach. And then the next morning I was just like, I'm either going to die or I'm going to get sober. And I'm like, I don't want to die. So let's get sober now. So I reached out and thankfully I went in and I think it was 3 to 3.5 months at a place over in Vancouver Island. And there were a lot of good parts about it that helped. Like I said, I managed when I left to stay sober for a year, but I went back to the Lower East Side and continued to work in the community that I was in, which again was surrounded by, I got myself a dog. I'm like, I'm not going to date. I'm going to do the single life. I'm going to have a dog. I'm going to take care of work my jobs. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And there was one day that, I was just under stress and I just told myself it was okay to meet my friend at the steakhouse and we're going to have a couple glasses of wine. And, a couple glasses of wine turned into, let's have a few whiskey. And then a few whiskey turned in, I'm going to get a few 8 balls. And then it turned into basically 2 weeks of debauchery where then I realized again, like, I was super fucked. I had no idea of where to go or what to do. I was hopeless. That's when things declined to the point of I wasn't making enough money. I had everybody had given up on me because, that's the shame of the addict. Like, oh no, this time I'm going to get better. And this time I'm going to do things differently. And, I just need some help with rent and I just need this and I just need that. And it's like, after a while, everybody's just like, fuck you, like you're not going to change. You're just going to keep doing the same thing. So one of the loneliest, heart-wrenching parts of my life was ending up homeless on the streets of Vancouver. And it wasn't for a long time. It was just like I said, I hadn't contacted my family. Some of the people that I had trained this really wealthy family that owned real estate down in the Lower East Side. And I remember one of the girls that I trained said, I have an office space that's not being used. And I remember sleeping under an office desk, and I had my dog at the time. So it's like, I don't know if you ever read the Sylvester Stallone story about him sleeping in the bus station with his dog, but that story really resonates with me because I'm literally in this place called the Dominion Building and I nicknamed it the Dominion Inn. And it was this business, it's for business professionals. They're lawyers. And I'm literally in there with a a blanket sleeping under a desk with my dog for a week, not knowing like just where the fuck am I going to go and what am I going to do? Like nobody believes me anymore. I've fucked everybody over. I've been a piece of shit. You know, I'm addicted. I don't know what to do. I've got this dog that I've got to take care of now. And it's, you know, literally like crawling out in the middle of the day and people seeing me and just feeling so ashamed and feeling just completely destroyed. So, you know, and then that went away, and then I ended up, you know, back on the streets. And I think after about a week, I contacted my family and I'm like, I need to come home because like I'm going to die. Like it's as simple as that. Like I've lost everything. I can't work anywhere anymore because I've fucked people over. I haven't shown up. I've promised things. I haven't done them. I've borrowed money. I've done this. I've done that. So it's like basically the most destitute and hopeless position that you can find yourself in. And, you know, thank God for my parents because they did bail me out. And I got on a flight from Vancouver to Toronto, and then I was supposed to go Toronto to Halifax. And the thought of going home and all the old ghosts of home and the traumas, the past traumas of Christmas past and all the horrific things that I had, that before I got on the flight, I was hammering massive amounts of oxy, cocaine, booze. And when I boarded the flight, I was completely mangled. And I remember sitting down and I had little blue, what I referred to as Zopiclone. Anybody that's familiar with pharmacy medications, Zopiclone are a sleeping pill that you can take half of one and it's probably going to put you out for about 12 hours. I thought it was a good idea to take 2 or 3 of them. I can't remember how many I had, but I just took them and I'm like, I'm going to wake up in Halifax, not even thinking I need to get off the plane in Toronto. So, you know, basically what happened to me there was I was had to be medically removed. I had the first responders, the RCMP, and first responders had to pull me off the plane in Toronto. So my dog is underneath, you know, in the checked baggage in his crate, and I'd given him a little doggy pill, a little doggy Ativan to put him asleep, so he was fine. And I got hauled off the plane. I went into full-on drug coma. So the stewardess tried to wake me up, and there was no waking me up. And they pulled me off the plane, and I woke up in Toronto in the hospital, hooked up to machines. They were rehydrating me. They had pumped my stomach. And I remember thinking, the only thing I think of was my dog. I woke up and I was like, Poppy, Poppy. And they're like trying to like, this guy is fucked. I'm like, Poppy. And I remember pulling all the wires out of me and being like, I got to go. Like I was on the phone with somebody and I'm like, I got to get back to the airport. So literally they're like, you got to stay. And I managed to get back in a taxi, still completely fucked. Like everything is sideways. I've taken way too many drugs of every kind. And all I can think about is getting my dog. Because I'm like, you know, you're a piece of shit, Chris. The last thing you're going to do is leave your dog behind. You got to go and at least this one thing. And I mean, I get back to the airport and I've still got the medical bracelet on. And I'll give a little caveat, a little lead into this story. But I've been working on a book concept. And there's a chapter that I have. And the chapter is called Good People. And the whole philosophy behind good people is, in my travels, I have met people that follow the book and follow the rules. And then I've met good people that look the other way and do the humane thing and have some humanity. Because I think that we're lacking that big time. So the person that inspired that chapter is the man that I'll tell you about next. So I'm literally at the airport. I managed to be quick enough to get to where my bags are, and there's my dog in his crate. So I get to my dog and I open it, he's fine, and I'm with him and everything's, I look up at the end of the airport and I see in a V formation, the RCMP with the huge RCMP officer that's probably about 6'4", 300 pounds, walking and then being flanked by a few other officers. And he comes up to me and he looks at me and he's like, he says, "You're back." I'm like, I don't know this guy. He was the RCMP officer that came when I was hauled off the flight. And I remember he looked at me and I'm like, I looked up at him and I was just so defeated at the time. I'm like, I'm just trying to get me and my dog home. And he looked at me and I remember he just he told the other officers, he's like, "Don't worry." He's like, "I've got this." And he's like, "You guys can go." And I remember this big officer sat down next to me and he tried to get to know me. He's like, "What happened to you?" He's like, He's like, I saw you when they pulled you off the flight. He's like, how did you get all those scars on your body? How did you do this? He's like, where are you going? And he's like, he actually had, like I said, it's like the whole concept for good people is this man very easily could have been like, here's this fucko again that drug overdosed, get his ass, put him in the car, take him to prison. You know, it's as simple as that. Put him in the jail and we'll figure out what to do with him. Instead, he's like, look, he's like, you need to get a meal. So he went and he took me to a burger joint and he bought me a fucking burger.
And that's so simple, but how amazing.
No, it was like, it was a turning moment. It was one of those moments in my life where I'm like, I always hated the cops. I had a couple friends that were cops, but cops would always chase me around for smoking pot. And I'm like, this plant makes me happy. Fuck off. Like, don't bust me for smoking something that makes me happy. I'm not hurting anybody. I never liked the police. And it was like right away, I just thought, here's another fucking cop that's going to come. He's going to harass me. He's going to bust me. And it's like, so I rechecked my dog and, you know, I went off with this officer. He sat down. I remember he ordered a burger for me and he had one as well. And he even had a sense of humor because I'm like, you want to get a beer? And he's like, no. He's like, no more beer for you. He's like, so I was like, oh, okay. I just thought, you know, I just thought I'd give it a try. It's like, you know, burger and a beer. Let's go. Come on. So he talked with me and he shared stories. And it was actually, he had a son who had an addiction problem. So he wanted to talk to me to try to figure out. And it was, you know, this makes me get emotional because it's like, again, here's a guy who could have totally fucked me up. He could have busted me. He could have caused so much shit for me. You know what he did? He took me to the WestJet check-in. He talked to one of the girls working at the desk. And I heard him over there talking, and it's like, okay. He's like, get your bags. He's like, check them in. He's all like, your flight's leaving in this amount of time. And I don't even remember his name because I was so fucked up. And it's like, you know, in the event that he does hear this podcast or somebody, you know, like it's a story that I know that he would remember because it was such a moment. We both shed tears having a fucking burger together, talking about, you know, life and talking. And literally like this cop just took his break with me to try to sort things out. He ended up going and getting me a flight. So not paying for a flight, just getting me a flight. And I remember he escorted me up with the girl at the check. And he said, remember, and he talked to her. He said, remember what I told you. And I was like, looked at him. He's like, no alcohol, get him on the plane. No serving alcohol, get him home and get him off the plane. And that's it. And I remember walking down the runway and he gave me a hug and off I went. I remember the stewardess looked at me. She's like, "Are you famous?" And I'm like, "More like infamous." It's like, so I got on the flight and I managed to get home. And I mean, that was the beginning of a long recovery session. So the transition started from being homeless in Vancouver, drug addicted, to going crash landing back at my parents' place. And this is right before the dead of winter in Nova Scotia, which is a horrific time to be there because you're snowed in. And just literally having to pick up the pieces of my life, like going from, like I said, having so many opportunities and being a young guy that's like, you know, in different circles and has lots of different skills to just completely destroying myself and having nothing left. And it was over a course of probably, I would say 2 years where I tried many different things. I would keep my training going. I slowly started to get back up and get going, but it was actually hot yoga that I got addicted to. Really? I started doing, and there's a lot of hatred for the Bikram community. Like a lot of people hate on Bikram because a lot of stuff has come to light about him with women. And I don't know the details. I don't know him personally. I just know that system of hot yoga, the 26 and 2, really helped my fucking body.
Hot yoga is my body. So good. Yeah. It's wild. Yeah. So good. I'm more flexible when I'm doing hot yoga than any other time in my life.
And not only that, it's like, it's just the feeling when you come out of that hour and a half of the torture chamber that it's like nothing else. I mean, for me, so I want to give a shout out to one of my closest friends, in Thailand. His name's Govert. And he has, if anybody goes to Phuket, Thailand, go and see Govert at Kata Hot Yoga. Kata Hot Yoga for me is Phuket. Like, okay. In Phuket. I mean, that man, he's a fucking legend. I mean, it's the hottest hot yoga you can go to. It's hot yoga in Thailand, guys. It's like, this is a step up. It's like, and I know he always fucks with the heater. I can see him over there. He's like Dr. Evil. He's always tweaking something before the class. It's not hot enough. It's like, we go a little hotter today. And it's like, I love it. But it's like, for me, again, I found that and I started training it. Like, I got addicted to it. And it was the everyday. And like I said, when I moved to Thailand, I got heavily involved in the yoga community. And
how did that, so the Thailand move, was that because of the yoga? Was that like you there on like a holiday? Like what happened between when you're going through this recovery period back in Nova Scotia to then going to Asia?
So what happened is I started to build a personal training business in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I ended up doing corporate training for a group of wealth investors. So I actually got hired on by these bankers that basically the whole team of them wanted to train with me. So I basically had this business built with them and I was training other people. And while I was doing that, like during that time, because of all my injuries, I have a screw in my back that digs into the sciatic nerve. And I was doing really heavy deadlifts and heavy rowing and something popped and I couldn't train. And then I started going to hot yoga and then hot yoga fixed it, but hot yoga didn't just fix it. It was like, now that I was doing it, for me, there's something about that hot yoga system, the originals 26-2 of having your mirror right in front of you. Cause now it's like you versus your ego. Do you know what I mean? There's something very symbolic for me about other yogis will say, oh, we don't like the mirror and Bikram isn't really yoga. And I've heard so much hate towards it. And it's like, again, I don't judge anything. If it even helps one person, then good, use it. Like, I'm not into Kung Fu, but I know some people that do it and they love it and it makes them happy. Then fucking have at it. You know what I mean? It's like, don't, like whatever people like. It's, again, I just felt that a lot of people were extremely judgmental when I started this. But for me, the heat made it easier for me to bend because of my injuries and my sore body. The mirror was a direct reflection of my shadow or my ego and every day facing it. And having to face who I am and working through it, and some days feeling great and some days feeling like shit, but I really got into it. So basically what happened is I was working along, but I was still not feeling, I was doing the personal training. I was doing my yoga. I reconnected with a friend that I had met in Vancouver. She was an actress and a stunt performer, a fitness champion, then became a very high level yoga teacher, who was working at a place called Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand. And her and I connected online and we started talking. And she said, why don't you come to Thailand and run some boot camp classes? And I remember it was like, that was when the transition happened. That was Joseph Campbell, the call to adventure. Yep. It's like, I remember, it's the other side of the world. I had just received the payment from the wealth investors for the month of, I believe it was December. And I remember the day after I got it, why don't you come and, Christmas is a busy time in Thailand. Why don't you come and see, come and check it out. You'll like it here. I basically, within, I think it was only a week or two, made all the arrangements, shut everything down, walked away from everything and got a one-way ticket to Thailand. And just with no real idea, just knowing this one girl that was there. And over the course of, ended up spending the next 5 or 6 years in Thailand. So went from landing there from, like I said, I had rehabbed myself enough, but I was still dealing with issues. I mean, that's the thing with people listening to this is I never claim to be some kind of guru that has everything figured out. I still struggle every day, especially this year has been tough. And it's like, and this will come into the ayahuasca retreats. I never try to take the position that I'm this guru who has healed all my traumas and I know everything now. It's like, you know what? I'm a human being and the world just keeps traumatizing me as the days go by and I learn new tools and learn. So I've been on retreats where people put themselves up. And I think Terence McKenna said it best. Terence McKenna is a famous writer who worked with mushrooms. He said, nobody knows what's going on. Do you know what I mean? And I think we all need to remain humble because no matter what we achieve in this life, there is so many unknowns and there's so many things that we don't understand. So it's like, again, it's like, I don't want people listening to think, oh, like a yoga superstar and ayahuasca and everything figured out. No. I'm on a journey to heal myself and it's taken me around the world several times and I'm still on that journey, but I don't mind people joining me on the journey and partaking in the things that I've found that work for me and bring me some solace. So when I went to Thailand, I'm still carrying a lot of those traumas and hadn't completely dealt with things, but I wasn't actively drug addicted. Do you know what I mean? I would still drink from time to time, but I wasn't getting into the heavy shit like the cocaine, and it wasn't going apocalyptic like it had in the past. But I spent years. I started working, doing boot camp classes, teaching yoga, running huge groups of people up the side of Big Buddha Mountain. It's a famous place in Phuket where people train. All the fighters train there. Many people go for their fight camps. I mean, there's tons of great fighters. Israel Adesanya was training there.
Yes.
Roger Huerta was training there. Mark Hunt would come in. Then there's also another gym that opened up, AKA American Kickboxing Association, with Mike Swick and all his guys. So it's just a hotbed. Like, Phuket is amazing, but yeah, have you guys been Phuket? Have you been?
No, I've never been, but I've been over to Thailand. But no, I was thinking as well about what you said just then about, I'm still dealing with traumas myself. I'm still trying to get by. I think that's such an important thing, it seems to me, to acknowledge that, right? Because the moment you start to claim being, the guru, and you set kind of unreachable heights for anyone who is dealing with trauma and thinks that they must be able to get to this place of kind of complete tranquility, perfection, everything's dandy, when actually there's like obviously a lot of hardship that you still go through even when you are recovering or recovered.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, there's we call them with PTSD, it's the invisible wounds. And, any soldier that has been to war and has seen combat, or anybody that's been involved in, horrific traumas, it's like, those invisible wounds, they stay with us. And this isn't to deter anybody from their healing, but I've found, for me personally in my journey, there's a famous passage that was written about trauma. I can't remember the author, but it's like, some things can't be healed. You just have to make space for them. And that really resonated with me, because there are things like the car accident I was in. I fell asleep at the wheel and a woman died because of that. I can't fix that. I cannot go back and fix that. What's done is done.
Yeah.
And no matter what anybody tells you when it comes to trauma, you can't have anybody tell you that your trauma is not significant if it's something that you have to deal with every day. I mean, that's the reality. So again, like, I can't go back and change that. It's something that's haunted me. I've had nightmares around it, and I've literally just had to learn how to make space for it. And part of my rehab journey was like, would the woman who died want to see you completely fucked up and drug addicted? Or would she want to see you doing well in your life and helping people? And it was one of those aha moments where I'm like, okay, like, I need to have a purpose. It's like Viktor Frankl. Have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
It's wonderful.
Oh, fuck, man. Like, there you go. Boom. You got to make sense of the suffering, man. Yeah. If you don't make sense of the suffering, it will drive you insane. It's driven me insane. I've been past the brink of insanity and back quite a few times in my life.
Another thing I'm thinking is that the setting and the people you have around you is so important, right? Like, when you talk about East Afghanistan versus being in Phuket with all these people who are working really hard, getting really fit, being healthy, it's like, it sounds obvious, but like, your whole life changes by the people you have around you and the setting you're in. Even like weather, I'm sure, like Southeast Asia is a pretty nice place to be. So like, I would imagine that your whole life dramatically changes because of the place you put yourself in. And it's no coincidence that you decided to stay in Thailand versus, you probably realized that when you got there, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, you touched on one of the big things, and why I haven't, I love Canada, it is my home. It's where I'm from.
Yeah.
But the thing that really deters me is half of my body is made out of metal. When it gets to -20, I get really fucking cranky.
Wow. That's so true. I never thought about that.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I love doing my Wim Hof breath work. I love doing my ice baths. I love doing my cold therapy. But when I'm done, I like to be warm. It's like, I don't want to be cold for 6 fucking months. Like, that's a little
your whole
bit
body
too
is
much.
just thaw out. Is that how it works?
Oh, it's brutal. So yeah, Thailand is like, how is it like, you wake up in the morning, the birds are singing, the jungle is coming alive, and you're going to your work. Like, so when I was in Thailand, like you said, and this is something huge in recovery, and something that, I didn't want to sound like I was shitting on the 12-step program, because what the 12-step program offers is community. And I think, but it wasn't a community for me. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you can find your community and find your people and your tribe, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, then that's very important. You need to have the people that you can that you can call and you can rely on and have that community, because without that, we can get lost in our own thoughts. And it's always good. I mean, that's why fighters have coaches, because when you're in the heat of battle and the punches are flying, sometimes you don't even remember. Your coach's like, hey, you were dropping your hands here, you were doing this, you were doing, oh, okay. It's like, and then now you click in. Whereas life is the same. Life is a battle. And I have this argument with yogis all the time. Like, Chris, life doesn't have to be a fight. I'm like, life is a fight. It's like, I don't care what you tell me. For me, it's been a fight. Yeah. So it's like, maybe yours, like, you can go back to your ashram and you can chant Om Shanti and have your little kumbaya and all that. But I've been in a fucking war zone since I've been 8 years old. So that's what it is. And I'm going to do the best I can to try to, learn how to cope with these things. So you touched on a great point. Like, after I was working at Tiger Muay Thai and I was doing the personal training sessions, an opportunity opened up for me to manage a detox center. So with that word comes a lot of, woo-woo stuff.
This is in Thailand?
This is in Thailand.
In Thailand,
so
okay.
In Thailand, the first year was a tough year getting established, because, I'm the new guy on the block, and there's a lot, when you're in Phuket, there's a lot of mega athletes everywhere. And there's a lot of, interesting things going on. But I ended up getting an opportunity to manage this detox center. And what the detox center did is it put people through fasting programs. So we would literally have some people come in, a lot of really successful business people from all over the world, travelers, all different sorts of people. But the main objective of this detox retreat was to give people a reset. So basically what we started doing is putting people on fasting programs. There's a guy, his name's Dr. Bernard Jenkins or Bernard, can't remember his name right now. He worked with fasting programs, juice fasting, working with a lot of cancer patients, and using kalimas, which is hydrocolon therapy. So basically like enemas to flush out the bowel and do all these types of things. There were a lot of really, like, when I first went on, for me, I'm old school. Like, I'm all about healthy diet, daily exercise, do your breath work. Like, there's tried, tested, and true things, but then there's like different foot baths that are supposed to pull the toxins out of the bottom of your feet. Yeah. And, there's all these little things that, I'm very skeptical. I ask a lot of questions, and it's like, sometimes people get offended by it, but I'm like, I'm not going to sit for an hour with my foot in this bath.
It's because
you're not fucking doing anything. I can be doing my breath work over here. Like, that's, what I mean? Like, I really want results, and I want to know. So there was a lot of like woo-woo stuff, but I took that with a grain of salt, and I got in there and I started working with people. And I had a run for about, I guess it was almost 3 years, where every week, it started slow, but we built the business after about a year to the point where we're getting 20 to 30 new people every week. So I'm meeting people through all of the US, Canada, London, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Australia, New Zealand. I'm meeting people from every corner of the world. It was such a unique opportunity. So literally every week, I get to I'm basically the program supervisor. I basically set up the whole day for people. So the day would always begin. We had different yoga teachers that would come in. I would teach yoga a couple times a week. We would always do what was referred to as a tea circle, which became pretty famous, where I would have, everybody circle up. We would serve up some ginger tea, and it would just be a chance to express gratitude and then share stories. And it's like what we're doing now. So I would have these massive tea circles, and it started to become really popular. But what I started to notice is I started to notice consistencies with people. And it was a really interesting chance for me to study different people from different parts of the world doing exact same things that other people were doing, and seeing the relations and then seeing my own behaviors and seeing. So literally, like, I'm working with people that would crash land and come in from like Beijing, businessman from Beijing, pasty white, puffy, drinking whiskey every night, hasn't seen the sun, probably doing like 16-hour days, completely miserable. Come in, spend 2 weeks, fast, do yoga every day, look amazing and feel great. Life is beautiful. It's like, go back, message a month later, fighting with my wife, drunk again, working too much. And it's like, and I would get these experiences from people all over the world. And I'm just like, watching them. And it was all like these similar things that for me, it's not what I would like. It's not a sustainable retreat. You come, you do all these healthy things, and you go back to the situation that puts you there, and you just go right back into it. And it's like human nature. We have these patterns and these loops. Have either of you guys watched the television show Westworld? Have you seen that?
Season 1. Yeah.
You've seen season 1.
Yeah, I haven't
so
seen
it's like season 1 is the one, but it's like, I'm fascinated by that show because it's like the loops that we live in that we can't get out. There's a term in yoga that's referred to as samskara, which is a groove.
Yep.
And you can create this groove. And it's once you've created that groove, it's so hard to get out of it. So like I said, the reason I brought up Westworld is because we're like machines.
Yeah.
We get into a loop pattern and we can't get out. It's like, and no matter how unhealthy or it's like the whole concept of the Joseph Campbell, like leaving the comfort zone. Our comfort zone can be so fucking uncomfortable, but we stay in it anyway because it's familiar.
So I think you might have touched on something pretty profound there, amongst many profound things over the last time period. But like you've had it's kind of like a science experiment where you've seen, I don't know, probably hundreds of people from around the world across different cultures. Right.
It's close to thousands now.
Thousands.
Close to thousands.
Yeah.
Like literally. And I'm not just, it's been a lot. There's been a lot of people.
Well, and the thing is, it's like you've seen what someone goes through and maybe they go back to their home in Abu Dhabi or Beijing or whatever. But what's the learning there? Because if that Beijing businessman goes back and he hasn't changed his life in a permanent, awesome way, does that mean that the way to change your life in a more permanent way, no matter whether you're in Thailand or if you're back home with your wife and kids, like what is the solution to that? Because I'd imagine like that Beijing businessman doesn't sound like he was a success. But like, what are the other situations where maybe someone went back to their home in London and that person texted you a month later and said, Chris, I have kept up my practice, or like things are better permanently?
There have been a lot of success stories, but not to be Captain Doom. Okay. I would say probably 80-20.
Wow.
I would probably say 80-20. I would say that people, I would say that, and that's probably being generous. Yeah. Most people revert back to, again, it's like a prime example. I'm not going to name names and put anybody on blast because, it's a confidentiality of some of the things, like, just so you know, like when you put people on a 3-day to 7-day water fast, that's not physical. That's all mental. Like I don't know if either of you guys have done any fasting before, but what happens is when you fast, a lot of emotions come up. It can be, I don't want to say it can be a psychedelic experience, but it can be an extremely transformative experience where a lot of your demons come up when you're going into depriving yourself of food and only drinking water and doing breath work and doing yoga and meditation. It can open up some dark places. So again, it's like, I had this unique opportunity to work with people in their darkest moments where a lot of those things were coming up. And again, I would see a businessman who literally would come in and he's with a wife who he doesn't really love. It's just an arrangement. He pays, she takes care of the house, and his life is just empty. And it's like that would come up for him. So again, it's like, and this will tie into like working with plant medicines, is we have these experiences, a fasting experience or a psychedelic experience or any type of transformational period. There comes a point where it's like, you have to integrate the work. And if you don't, you'll go back. So with Carl Jung, he always refers to the shadow work, and shadow work is very important work, of the things that are unconscious, making them conscious, bringing them to the light, integrating them, and then learning the lesson. And I'm still struggling with that some areas of my life. Like I've worked through a lot of shadows, and, I still have temptations where something goes really bad. I want to reach for drugs, but I remember how bad it ends. So it's like, I'm not nearly as bad as I used to be, but that's not a cop out to say that there's not still a lot of work to be done. For me now, there's still a lot of other shadows, and working with this guy who, like I said, he comes from Beijing. He's in a horrible marriage that he's not happy. He doesn't feel connection with anybody. He's overworked. He has an experience and realizes that he needs to leave his wife. But these are big decisions. How do you know what I mean? It's like, now he's going to leave his wife. He's going to lose half of everything that he owns because he hasn't protected him.
And I think the really interesting thing about, what you just said is that you went in some really, really dark places, right? You hit like real sub bottom of like what you could have possibly been in. It was, you talked about despair, and it's just super compelling. And from that, you get a lot of emotional leverage. I wonder if some of these folks who, in a slightly unhappy marriage, maybe slightly discomforting, but at the end of the day, they're fairly comfortable in their day-to-day life. Whether actually what they would need would be to hit further to the rock bottom before bouncing up.
Yeah. There's a term. It's a term called the functioning alcoholic, and that's the worst type of alcoholic. I was not a functional alcoholic. I was fighting in the streets, throwing up on myself. Like it was obvious that this guy needs a fucking hand here. It's like, it's the businessman that has a bottle of scotch every day after work and keeps it together and hides it, that can go on for a lifetime. Yeah. It can go on for a fucking lifetime. And because again, it's like hitting bottom can be a blessing if you use it. You know what I mean? Like if you hit rock bottom and you're completely fucked, there comes a moment of vulnerability where you're on your knees and you're begging for help. And there's some kind of the vulnerability and the actual humanity of that, where you realize that you need help. And it's like, and like I said, these people that I worked with, they could function. And, you know, there's escapists and there's endurists, you know, like endurism or escapism. And I love those terms because, you know, for my life, a lot of it was all about escapism and getting away from things. For some of these people like endurism, it's like the function, I can take it. I can take on more projects. I can work more hours. I can pay more for my wife. I can do this. I can do that. And it's like, you just endure it and you never, you know, until like those people sometimes just hit a point where they have a complete mental breakdown. Some of them get past, but again, it's like what drew me to working with psychedelics is the fact that psychedelics, the example or the analogy that I use, it cuts through all the bullshit. So you can put somebody on a fast and you can do all these different things and you can get healthy and then you go back. Having a psychedelic experience is like dropping a fucking A-bomb on the issue. And then you're left with the choice. It just makes it now like, these are your issues. What are you going to do? You know, like I get asked all the time, like, oh, will ayahuasca cure me of this? Like everybody's looking for this like quick little, you know, they just want the quick fix. Oh, will this get me in shape? It's like, guess what? Once you get in shape, you need to keep training or else you're going to get out of shape. So it's a daily work. It's like, no, psychedelics are not just going to magically cure you of your depression. They are going to lift your spirits. And I have seen it cure depression to the point where now you can make educated choices on your daily routine, your community, who you're around, who you have a relationship with, all these different things, but it's still you that has to pull the trigger. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, that's what I just saw. Like for me, it was after a while of working with people, it's like all I'm offering in Thailand is an oasis where you come and you get in great shape. For some people stayed for 2 months and it was amazing, the results, and they'd go back, but they wouldn't make lifelong changes. So they didn't go through it. They went through like a beginning transition, but then reverted back. Do you know what I mean? And I see that. And I still have that with some of my issues. I mean, some things, and that's what fascinated me. Like such massively successful business people that can't get themselves in shape. I'm like, you can figure out how to structure all these businesses and do this and do that, but your own home is a fucking wreck. Like, what's going on? Like, why? I don't get it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's very complex.
And you kind of discovered that through your work in Thailand, right? So you first started using ayahuasca with folks in Thailand, was it? Or was that when you got to Peru, you started working?
No, when I was I have worked extensively throughout my life with psilocybin. That is one of the main medicines that I worked with. So and when I say I've worked with it, I've had mega hero doses. Like there's a term in psychedelics that's referred to as what's called the hero's dose or the God's dose. Wow. When it comes to psilocybin, a hero's dose, you know, Joseph Campbell, you're definitely going to see dragons on the hero's dose. It's like, lock and load, baby. It's, yeah. So a hero's dose is 5 dried grams. So 5 dried grams is going to give you a pretty extreme experiences. I've worked with psilocybin to the point of taking upwards of 10 to 15 grams during ceremonies to have these deep, profound experiences. So I had already worked with psilocybin, LSD, marijuana for me was one of the things that, like I had touched on earlier, that pulled me through a lot of my traumas. And it's interesting in the medicine community, marijuana is still very much hated on. Like for some reason, it's like, oh, it's an escape drug and it's this and that. And it's like, I have friends that smoke a joint, they eat a bag of Twinkies and they play on the coach Modern Warfare. You know what I mean? It's like they don't do anything and they're unemployed. probably marijuana isn't the drug for them. You know, it's like, then I've met other people that some of the top jiu-jitsu competitors in the world are fucking potheads. You know, it's like they have a tournament called High Rollers where you literally get high before you roll, and the winner of the tournament gets a pound of fucking California Kush. It's like, you know, it's like, so again, it's like, and those are some of the best athletes in the world. Yeah. So you can't, like, you know, I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but I know a lot of pro MMA fighters that are all about getting high. It's like, you know what I mean? So again, it's like, in my work, there are different medicines for different people. You know what I mean? If you're schizophrenic, probably lay off the marijuana because it's going to cause, you know, some problems.
Yeah.
If you're a guy that deals with a lot of fucking trauma and injury, that has a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, but can use some CBD and some THC to get him going, and he's still productive, I don't see the problem. Why does society deem it okay for me to take an antidepressant every single morning when I wake up, but if I smoke a joint, I'm a lazy pothead? It's like, it drives me fucking insane. It's finally the stigma is lifting around it, but it still drives me nuts because, you know, it's big pharma to me is, I went on during my Vancouver stint, when I told you that I was suicidal, it was after about a year and a half being on a medication called Wellbutrin. I had been taking almost 450 milligrams of Wellbutrin every day. It drove me insane. I was getting what's called brain zaps. I would go to sleep and I'm like, and I remember one day thinking like, oh no, like I've fucked my brain. Like my brain is destroyed now. Like what is going on? Like I'm waking up, it's like short circuiting. I remember flushing and going cold turkey, and I don't recommend that for anybody because I flushed all the pills and went cold turkey. Wow. That's when I laid the tarp down in the bathtub and thought, I'm going to blow my fucking brains out because they're already ruined. Like, so when I get into, like, it's something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah.
The medical industry has two sides. There's a side, the surgeons that can help, and the people, there's a lot of great doctors out there that tell people you should do yoga and eat healthy and do this. And there's a lot of really fucking shitty doctors that will get elderly people hooked up on medications they don't need. They will upsell people and push medications on them that they don't need. And it's horrible. It's absolutely fucking horrible. It drives me insane that, and now the big thing that's happening is big pharma like Pfizer that's coming out with the, you know, with our shots is also trying to take over the pharmaceutical industry with regards to psychedelics. Now they're trying to patent certain type of psychedelics that they can use it. And to me, it's like, it's one of the last stands for me. It's like Mother Nature and the medicines that we get from her need to be respected and not put into fucking synthetic form and put by these doctors who are just getting paid by big pharma. I actually had a chance to spend, the man who, again, I have a few shout outs, but one man in particular that's leading this charge. You guys, I'm sure, are familiar with Wim Hof and the Wim Hof method. Yep. Do you know the Iceman?
Yeah. Yeah, we spoke about him with
his work that he's doing. Yeah. So the work that he's doing now is trying to get people to take health into their own hands through breath work, through exercise, through these cold therapies. And he's waging a war. I spent a week with him and we talked a lot about big pharma and what it's doing to people and how it's fucking people up. And look at the rise of school shootings and suicides and all these crazy things that are going on. You know, I think there's a direct correlation between that, you know, pharmaceuticals and even, you know, social media. There's all these things that are bombarding us every day and driving us insane that, you know, I'm not saying that social media is bad because we're getting a chance to communicate. We're all in different parts of the world. That's beautiful. But the dark side, the addiction, the obsession, the being glued to the phones, I know you guys know it because we all see it. We've become disconnected from nature. We've become disconnected from the things that feed our spirit and our hearts. And it's even more so now. We're being pushed into this new world now that it's like, you know, it's like we're being forced into this. So it's going to be more difficult now for people that suffer with depression and mental illness, more difficult than ever because we're isolated and we're being forced online. And I've noticed a shift in my health, my mental health from the last year being here in Peru. And now everybody that I deal with is online. I really want to get back to work. I want to get back to working with people one-on-one and having that, you know, this is great. This is a great platform, but we need human connection. That's one of the things that I learned. And it's, again, one of the chapters that I have that I've been preparing for my book is the need for human contact. When I was 8 years old and put into a quarantine situation where Nobody touched me unless it was a fucking needle or a jab or a poke, or we're going to take a piece of skin here, or we're going to do this. And for months, not having any human connection and touch, it drove me insane. As an 8-year-old, I didn't know what was going on, but I lost my fucking mind. You know what I mean? Like, these are the things that other people are going to feel, that they're not going to have. Like, I can't go to a physical yoga class right now. They don't have them. They're all, the yoga studios are shut down. All the, just that being able to go and interact with people, like, it's not good. So again, the reason I brought up a guy like Wim Hof is that we talked a lot about big pharma and what it's doing. And I think, an example is, like, I had to have a massive stomach surgery when I left Thailand. They cut me open and it cut pieces out. I got an infection. I had the choice of taking antibiotics or having another surgery. I took the antibiotics. I didn't need the other surgery. There's an example of medication being used effectively. Taking somebody who's, like, I know a story of a woman back where I grew up. She got thrown off her horse. She was a very successful lady, had a family, a house, owned horses, thrown off her horse, broke her neck. Doctors put her on pain medication. She got addicted to opiates. 5 years later, she's lost her family, her horses, her home, everything. That's an example of the medical industry not serving. It's just a pill to band-aid a problem that's not going to go away. There's a quote that I use all the time. It's like, anybody treated with Western medicine needs to recover twice. Once from the affliction and once from the medication. Medication doesn't cure people. It makes them sick. That's the reality. We need real medicines and real means of healing people, and not just the physical realm, and the mental and the emotional as well. And to me, plant medicines is where that taps in. That's the.
How did that
connect us?
Yeah. How did that lead to the creation of what you're doing in Peru? Because where we last left off on the story, so you're in Thailand, you've been hosting a lot of these retreats for people from around the world. And sometimes it felt like what they were getting was like kind of a quick fix of making their life great for like a little bit. But then you realize that based on what you've experienced throughout your whole life, the healing benefits of psychedelics. And is that what led you to Peru to set up Earth Medicine Experience?
Yeah. So what happened is I had a really good run in Thailand. And then at the end of my run in Thailand, basically the place that I was managing got a corporate squeeze. There was a power shift, a power change. Some new people came in. I was working with my brother and my girlfriend at the time. Both of them ended up leaving, and I was left there alone. And I basically was being overworked and underpaid, and just hit a point of burnout, like where I was dealing with so many people, and now I didn't have my team around me that I was used to having. And I had a relapse. I had a relapse in Thailand for about a week of vodka and booze, and basically you can walk into a pharmacy in Thailand and get whatever you want. Anybody that's been to Thailand, you go to the pharmacy, it's like you can get aspirin, but you can also get heavy duty painkillers as well. You can get whatever, you can self-prescribe whatever you want. Like, I could literally walk into a pharmacy and be like, okay, I want 200 tramadol, which I did. And then you can go to another pharmacy, I want 200 tramadol. And then you go to another pharmacy, and it's like, so Thailand can be dangerous. It's, you can go there to get in shape, but there's a dark side to Thailand as well. I mean, I could tell another hour story about Thailand and the sex trade industry and the poor young girls and young boys that are subjected to such horrific shit over there. It's fucking disgusting. And I won't even go there. I mean, there is a dark side to every place you go. And for some reason, I tend to get into the dark places. It's like, it's not good. So I ended up having a relapse, and something in my stomach exploded. And I was rushed back home to Nova Scotia. And basically what I was told at first that I had pancreatic cancer, and I only had a few months left to live. So, and then after a few more tests and reviews, I ended up going in for a stomach surgery where they cut from just under my sternum down past the belly button, opened me up, cut a chunk of the pancreas off, cut the appendix out, the gallbladder, removed a piece of the intestine, and stitched me back up. And within a couple months I had recovered, and I found myself back down in the Maldives with the girl that I had been with working in Thailand. But at that point, that was again one of the lowest points. It was another transitional phase because, I'm in this place in the Maldives. I'm with my girlfriend, who I loved very much at the time, but I was dealing with so much trauma. I didn't know how to accept love, how to give love. It was a very difficult time for me because literally I'm with my girlfriend living in a tree house that most people pay $5,000 a night to be in the Maldives. We're being treated like rock stars. We're the fitness couple. We're teaching yoga. We're doing fitness classes, and it turned out really well. But again, the compound, the mental and the emotional trauma from now another surgery, and literally like this surgery really set me back. Like, I don't know if you study much about the gut brain, but they say that there's the microbiome in the stomach that affects our mental state. Well, literally I had a doctor tell me again, it's like, you just had an A-bomb go off in your stomach. We just cut you open and cut all kinds of chunks out. And it affected me mentally so badly. In the Maldives, hobnobbing with fucking, ultra elite, being around, like, should be happy, and being suicidal again. So left that, went to a different part of Thailand again, and tried to set up my own business where I wouldn't lose control like I had in the other business. And that went sideways. And I had just been through so much. I went sideways. I left Thailand in a hurry, crash landed back in Canada, and spent about 4 months just re-picking the pieces up. And I remember, what do I want to do? And it's like, I've always wanted to go to Peru and drink ayahuasca. So I booked a 3-week retreat for myself. I came, this would have been now 3 years ago. So it's 3 years ago since I landed in Peru. I spent 3 weeks at a retreat center drinking ayahuasca 3 times a week, smoking toad, working with wachuma, all these different medicines, stayed on, volunteered at a center and did some work with people. And because I had seen, how these centers were being run, there was just like literally 20 people jammed in a room, almost throwing up on one another. And I'm like, this isn't how it should be done. Like,
right. I've heard so many horror stories about some of the stuff that goes on over there.
Oh, we can go in. Like, I've literally been in ceremony rooms where they're so close together. The person was so high, they thought they had their bucket. They just leaned over to throw up in their bucket. They don't have their bucket. They just throw up in somebody's lap. I'm like, Jesus, guys, like, come on. Like, I'm like, again, I'm no doctor or guru, but I'm like, come on, guys, we can do this a little better here.
It's clearly not going right there.
Again, I don't put anybody on blast, so I'm not going to name names, but there are many centers, and it's like, there's a center for everybody. Do you know what I mean? I think there are places that, are you guys familiar with Tim Ferriss? You follow Tim Ferriss at all? Yeah. So it's like, he always refers to it as the drum and feather crowd. Yeah. So the drum and feather crowd is like, they're here in the Sacred Valley, and they're here, in the jungles, and there's the ultra, like the spiritualists, and a lot of people have tagged them, they're the spiritual bypassers, because it's just like, we should just trust Mother Ayahuasca, and we should just, and it's all just very aloof and like, pleasantries and love and light and namaste and all this is great. But sometimes there's not the substance behind it. So the center that I ended up it was good in a lot of ways, because I made some great contacts there. It's where I actually met Steve and Simon. So that's where I connected with those guys. But the reality is it was a meat market. So it was literally just like, every week we're going to jam as many people into this area as we can. We're not going to pay the facilitators, and we're not going to actually have anybody trained on staff. Like, I remember halfway through a wachuma day. Wachuma is a cactus medicine. Its active ingredient is mescaline. And having somebody come up to me after a week of medicines, and they were crying, and they're like, I was fine until I had this medicine. Now I want to kill myself. And I'm just thinking, and I don't, and for me, like, I didn't even really, like, I'm like, what was your name again? Because there were so many people for so long. Wow. I couldn't physically or mentally keep up with all the new people. And it's too much. You're serving people medicines, you're letting them go, and you're not giving them support, and you're not guiding them with the integration. So for me,
that's how you get these horror stories presumably emerging of folks who are walking around basically as zombies. They've just not been looked after. They've had no idea how to go about doing this. And they don't really know even how to get back out of Peru at that stage.
Yeah, and they had that issue. They had the place that I was at for a while. A guy jumped in the fucking river and disappeared for a couple of days, and then came back during one of the ceremony nights, like out of the woods, like had been gone and no screening. Like everybody, like, so the reason that I created Earth Medicine Experience is because I literally talk to every single person for minimum an hour before I even consider booking them. Mm-hmm. It's like, I go through a process of wanting to know why they're coming, what they want to get out of the experience, and try to match the groups so they're fit. I mean, this other place, a guy that was literally like, he was schizophrenic. Before one of the ceremonies, he shaved half of his head. So he shaved half of it and there was some hair hanging off. And I'm like, and I remember looking at the person in charge and saying, do not serve this guy medicine. No, he'll be fine. I'm like, he is definitely not fine. Like, it takes one to know one. I'm like, this guy's fucking crazy. It's like, I can see him. Like,
that must be dangerous for the other folks who are there as well, right? If you
so what happened that night? He was a Korean gentleman, and I ended up nicknaming him Korean Zombie because 30 minutes into the ayahuasca ceremony, he demanded he wanted a big cup. He drank it. And within 30 minutes, it was like 28 days later, zombie, freaking out in the corner, just making snarling and drooling and teeth, and everybody in the room being scared. So it's like, oh, of course, Chris, you take care of it. Oh, yeah, like the guy that said, don't fucking serve him medicine is now going to be the demon cleaner, and he's going to sweep the demon out for you. It's like, guys, and it's just, I saw so much of it, and at the end of the day.
It's laughable, but it's not funny.
Yeah.
Oh, it's sometimes with me, and I have a sixth sense of humor. It's because of the trauma. I know, and it's like, right? I can't help it. I'm a sarcastic motherfucker. I've got a black sense of humor. I wear black almost all the time. It's just my style. It's like, and I don't shun it because I enjoy, like, for me, I have to find some kind of humor in the insanity. I've had to. It's one of my coping mechanisms. Maybe it's not healthy. Maybe it's better than smoking crack. I mean, it is what it is. But
on a real small tangent, I saw a stint with Ricky Gervais, who's obviously a famous comedian who wrote The Office, and he said that him and his brothers were making jokes on the day of his father's death, because that's how you deal with it, and that's how the family wants to deal with it, and I think that's just completely okay.
Some people don't get it now that we're in cancel culture, and it's like we have heroes like Jordan Peterson who are being demonized, and comedians that are just trying to make light and bring some kind of social awareness to things being taken literally. And it's exhausting, man. Like I said, that's why I have to be very careful of who I pick on my retreats, because I run retreats for people who listen to Joe Rogan on a regular basis, people that have been involved in mixed martial arts, people that are just open and honest about the work they want to do. We definitely have space for the drum and feather crowd because we have team members that are into that, and I hold a space for that because for me, again, anything that's going to help people, I like to have a team that brings in, with the Earth Medicine Experience team, it's essentially 3 people. There's myself, who oversees connecting with people, getting to know them to bring them in. There's Kunti, who's the Mexican medicine woman who has been working with medicine that she doesn't just work with it, she embodies it. Do you know what I mean? There's some people that when you look at them, it's like, okay, this person's going to be doing this no matter how old they are, where they are in the world, or what state of the world is in. Kunti has always worked with medicines. She's actually lived with the Sonoran Bufo alvarius, the desert toad. The desert toad, it contains a toxin that contains 5-MeO-DMT, which for me is a very important medicine on our retreats that we use. Kunti has literally lived with the toads and collected the toad medicines in the Sonoran Desert. So I brought her in on the team because not only that she's an amazing musician and can speak English and Spanish, but she understands that medicine on a deeper level than most people. And for me, that's a very important medicine.
Yeah.
The other team members.
Why is that important that she understands it on that kind of level?
Because for me, the whole philosophy behind Earth Medicine Experience is to bring in natural psychedelics, not synthetic. So nothing that we use is synthetic. We don't give pills. We don't give powders that have been cooked in a lab. We work with Bufo alvarius, known as the desert toad, which is essentially when you catch the toad, it has glands behind the backs of its neck and glands on its back legs. So when a predator attacks it, it releases the toxin. The toxin kills the predator. Somebody, I don't know who, it's a mystery, figured out that if you squeeze the glands and the toxin goes onto a piece of glass, you dry the toxin and scrape it off. It's a brown kind of flaky material. You put it into a vaporizer, you vape it and smoke it, you have an out-of-body experience. So again, whatever motherfucker figured that out.
How does someone discover that?
Like first person.
And how many people died? And how many people died in the process of trying to figure that out?
Squeezing stuff,
yeah. So again, and for me, this is where the story all ties in now. When I was 19 and I told you about that out-of-body experience I had in the car accident, 20 years later, I smoked the toad for the very first time. It recreates that out-of-body experience.
Wow.
Almost identically. So the very unique position that I'm in is I've had quite a few near-death experiences. I've left my body through natural means, not through taking anything, but from almost dying, I've had an out-of-body experience. I can say there's a direct relation between that and the DMT realm, because I have passed over between life and death a few times now. And I've also worked extensively with 5-MeO-DMT being the toad medicine. It is for me the medicine of my choice. It's the reason that Mike Tyson just came out of retirement. It has completely saved Mike Tyson's life. He talks about it on Joe Rogan. There are other people. Anthony Robbins has smoked it. You know, there's many people that are talking about that are leaders in their area that, for me, the 5-MeO-DMT can give you a near-death experience without the trauma. So you can learn. If you talk to anybody or you research anybody that has a near-death experience, one of the first things they talk about is gratitude. Just being grateful for everything. Grateful to be alive, grateful to be here. You know, no matter how bad it gets, we'll figure it out. I've had that. Immediately after my near-death experiences, gratitude was overabundant. I'm overflowing. I'm just so happy to be able to brush my own teeth and dress myself, you know, because I've lost all that. But what happens with life? We're human. It's one of the human conditions. Life goes on. Those lessons start to fade. Yeah. And it's like, well, now I got to worry about this, and I got to deal with this thing, and I got to deal with that. When you can access a near-death experience in a toad venom, that's a pretty powerful thing. It's one of my goals is to be able to get that medicine in for people that are facing, you know, the end of life, you know, in hospitals that are so afraid of death. Because to me, it's like it's a portal between this realm and whatever other realm is. A big believer in the philosophy that is, you know, embodied with the movie Avatar, when they talk about all energy is only borrowed and one day we have to give it back. It sums up when people ask me what I believe in religiously or spirituality. It's like, I believe that we've been giving energy from some kind of source. I don't know what it is. I can't put it into human words, but I believe that done here, we return back to that. And that's, you know, and that's what I've discovered through working with toad medicine and having near-death experiences. So for me, very important that Kunti's on board for that, because like I said, she doesn't just use it, but she's also a defender of the toad. Like obviously, as everything else in the world, it's not finite. You know, we are going to run out of these things, and, you know, the weather is changing. And with the toad spends about 9 months laying dormant under the ground, and spends 3 months during rainy season in the Sonoran Desert and in the southern Colorado River as well, coming out during the 3 months where people collect it. Well, now the rainy season, if there's droughts, it affects it. So eventually it could run out. So that's just a harsh reality.
I'm curious, like, why Peru? Is Peru the only place where like this toad exists? And why did you pick Peru? Or are there other places that ayahuasca as well?
The toad is Mexican.
Okay.
The toad is from the Sonoran Desert in Mexico, and it's also found in the Colorado River. So that's where it's located from. Kunti is from Mexico, okay, but now we're in Peru. So the reason, again, that Kunti is, I just trust her work. I've watched her work with the toad medicine and how she approaches it, and it's beautiful. And we've had some profound ceremonies with people where they've crossed over and come back, and it's been amazing. So why Peru is because of the ayahuasca. So we're here because this medicine is obviously celebrated here. For me, our third member of the team and one of our most, you know, I'd say we're all important because we bring different backgrounds into the team. And what makes us unique is we all celebrate one another. We all celebrate our differences. And for me, part of the medicine work is being able to work with people who have different ideas and values than you do, but learning to find that space to work together. Like Kunti believes in a bunch of things that I'm not too sure about. I believe in a bunch of things that she's probably not too sure about. Same with Pepe, is like, who are these weird people from Mexico and Canada? Like, what are they thinking about? But we find space in ceremony. So Pepe is featured in a documentary called The Last Shaman on Netflix. So if anybody listening wants to get a little feel for his work, he's featured in that documentary, and he's in the second half. And he's like I said, the third team member. He lives just outside of Pucallpa, which is down in the Amazon. So right now, what I'm doing with these retreats is, this year I've already got a retreat plan for here where I'm at in Cuzco, which is up in the Andean mountain region, where we can work with toad medicine, ayahuasca. We fly Pepe up from the jungle. And we also work with huachuma, which is the cactus medicine, which is native to here in Peru. So the ayahuasca and the huachuma are native to here. The bufo alvarius, the toad, is native to Mexico. So we have Pepe, who's literally, legitimate Shipibo Canibo from deep in the jungle, and has been working with this medicine, a lineage of his uncle, his fathers, his grandfathers, his great-grandfathers. So I wanted to create the most authentic experience, but have it being a union of different styles. You know what I mean? So it's like, normally it's, you just work with ayahuasca and what's referred to as a Kambo medicine for purging, and you go to the jungle and you just work with that. I've seen through my experience that some people relate to different medicines in different ways. So for some people, like, a very interesting fact, out of 100 people, 99 will have a life-changing experience with the bufo alvarius, the toad. That one person will feel nothing, no matter how much you serve them. I've seen it. I've seen it. It blows my mind. I've literally served people like a tiny bit of toad, and they completely gone, out of body experience, and changes their life. Another person can literally empty 3 pipe loads and look at me and say, should I be feeling anything? And I'm like, you shouldn't even be here right now. Like, you should be gone. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Like, you should. So again, it's like, it's so mysterious. The same thing happens with ayahuasca. A great friend that comes and has been with us several times. I've watched her drink like a half a liter of ayahuasca, nothing, absolutely nothing. And sometimes I can see patterns. Like, if somebody has an extremely stressful job, like a first responder that is seeing so much trauma, I think sometimes those people put up defense mechanisms that blocks them from seeing so much pain and so much trauma to help them survive, but also it blocks out the good experiences. So I've seen that, but again, it's like, it's so random with psychedelics. You never know for sure. It's so hard to read.
So if someone is on your website, let's say earthmedicineexperience.com, what would be like is there a profile of a type of person that you think would be a best fit for this? You put them through that 1 hour, kind of like a screening call. Like, what types of people are like you would recommend?
For me, it's like, I've literally had on the same retreat, a hardened gangster. I've had a doctor. I've had a lawyer. I've had a lost soul. I've had, for me, what I look for is people that are, for me, and this may sound funny, but it's true. And I laugh with a couple of my guests because some of my guests really make me laugh. But number one is an open mind. You have to have an open mind. And number two is a sense of humor. And it's like,
I did not expect you to say that. That makes a lot of sense now I think about it. Yeah.
It's so, for me, because it changes the energy of the group.
Yeah,
when you've got 1 or 2 people that don't know how to laugh and how to abandon themselves, it creates this heavy energy. And it's like, we're dealing with like past sexual trauma, death, addiction. It's like, if you can't at some point just let go and laugh and be like, how fucked up is this shit? Like, do you know what I mean? If you can't get to that point, I don't want you on the retreat. I'm sorry. It's like, we'll send you to the Yum Shawnee crew down the road. We'll give you your drum and your feather and you can go on that way. It's like, leave us alone. But seriously, I mean, for me, I think that's one of the most overlooked aspects of our lives, that I think that we have to have fun and laugh as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
Shit gets so heavy, guys. It gets so fucking heavy. Like, there are retreats where literally like people reliving traumas, and it's like the next day to just be able to hug it out and laugh and just kind of let go. To me, it's a healing.
Intense. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's like that, it sounds funny and some people may be turned off by that, but it's like, I've been to centers where the people that are facilitating are so serious. That is not how you heal. You heal like this. And it's just like, I've heard that. Like I've literally heard somebody say that is not how you heal. And I just like, what the fuck? Like, it just takes me so off guard because I'm like, how the fuck do you know how they're going to, where are you from? What have you been through? Like, let's get to the nitty gritty. It's like, again, on our retreats, it's people from all different walks of life, but we all have to learn how to tolerate one another in the space. We may trigger one another, but we keep our open minds and a sense of humor and just be respectful. That to me is so important. It's like, and that's when the real healing begins, because on the retreats, you know, there's people that come in and they do have to work through heavy shit. And I just want to create a space where they feel like they can let their guards down and be completely vulnerable. And I've found with me personally, one of the best ways to diffuse the walls and is to abandon yourself with laughter. Okay, we're all friends here. Like, let's get comfortable, because you'll hear anybody that works with psychedelics, one of the most important aspects is set and setting. So set and setting, feeling like you're well supported enough. You're not going to be judged. If you end up, you know, rolling around on the floor and maybe shitting yourself while you're having your ayahuasca, nobody's going to judge, because that's what it is. It's like, it's a safe space. So, and I feel that we've created that, because literally in the last 3 years that Kunti and Pepe and I have been doing this, we've had people back sometimes for the 4th time, you know, literally because they know that they can just come and it's like, okay, now it's a chance to just let it all loose. You know, you guys have heard some of my stories. I ain't judging anybody. It's like, it's like, you know, again, and I don't claim to be the guru. I'm like, I'd rather walk with people on my healing. Like, I don't do my own healing when I'm running a retreat. I hold space as far as like, you know, set the space up that people feel good and they feel supported. But again, it's like there has to be an element of being able to feel comfortable enough to let go and go into those dark places, because that's where the healing happens. And it's like, I feel very grateful that I get to do it, because there's so many stories, again, that I could get into with just certain people having experiences that have changed their lives, have blown their mind. You know, I love it. I truly do. And I'm blessed to have a good team. You know, like I said, anybody listening, check out Pepe. Go to the website, read on the team page. There's a whole story about how Pepe, you know, the different things that he's been through, and they'll get to see on The Last Shaman as well. And Kunti's story is in there as well. And obviously I've been telling mine, but that's what makes me really happy about the team, is we've broken boundaries, and it doesn't make sense, but it works perfectly. You know what I mean? Like, you would never assemble this team being like, okay, we're going to need a Mexican medicine woman, a Canadian, whatever the fuck you want to call them.
Canadian walk into a bar.
The people can Nemo, it's like, send in the clowns. Bar, it's like,
serve them ayahuasca. Yeah. Well, Chris, that has been an incredible experience hearing your story. And
we could definitely go 4 more hours, by the way.
I don't even know what to say. I'm at like a loss for words right now.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And that's, you know, what we're doing here, sharing the stories. Storytelling is a powerful medicine in itself. We learn from others, or we hope to. You know, I've had a lot of people in my life that have come and shared their stories and been like, don't do it this way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or if you do, then back yourself up this way. It's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway, because I'm I learned the hard way. But our stories are powerful. And that's why I appreciate you guys having me on, because I do like to share the story and the lessons, you know, the lessons that I've learned, and then the lessons that I've yet to learn that I need to keep working. You know, it's the famous quote, you know, chop wood, carry water. You know, that's about as spiritual as it gets, guys. It's like, do the work.